Do you want to know the secret to making your home-sewn jeans look professionally made? It's called a flat felt seam. My name is Eben, and in this tutorial I'll show you 2 ways of making a flat felt seam. No matter the method you follow, the idea is the same, but the end result is slightly different. Okay, let's get started. So for a flat felt seam, the raw edges of the fabric are enclosed in the seam itself between 2 pieces of fabric. The seam allowance is pressed towards the wrong side on one fabric piece, while it is pressed towards the right side on the other fabric piece. Then the 2 pressed edges are wrapped around each other like hooks, and the seam is sewn in place with a double stitch from the right side. This creates a super durable seam, a signature of jeans. Like I said before, a flat felt seam can be done in 2 different ways. I'll start with my preferred method, which requires a 1.5 cm seam allowance. Here I've cut 2 pieces of denim and marked the 1.5 cm seam allowance with tailor's chalk. Bring the pieces to the ironing board and press one side 1 cm towards the right side. Then press the edge of the other piece 1 cm towards the wrong side. Place the 2 pieces next to each other, right sides facing up, and slide them over each other so they overlap by exactly 1 cm along the pressed folds. Stitch them together down the middle of the overlap. Next, fold the fabric over itself to shape the flat felt seam that encloses the raw edge on both the right and wrong side of the fabric. Pin in place. Stitch the seam allowance in place from the right side a couple of millimeters from the edge. Then do a second top stitch about 7 millimeters away from the first one. Now, you can also do a flat felt seam by using a 2 cm seam allowance. Place the fabric right sides together and stitch the pieces together with a 2 cm seam allowance. Bring the pieces to the ironing board and press open the seam allowance. Trim away 1 cm along one side. Then fold the 2 cm seam allowance around the trimmed edge so the seam allowance is fully enclosed under itself. Press again. From the right side, stitch the seam allowance in place about 1 cm from the edge. Then do a second top stitch a couple of millimeters from the edge. On the 1.5 cm seam allowance example, you should notice that the edge of the seam allowance is right between the 2 rows of stitching, as shown here by the pink chalk line. This means the seam finish is symmetrical down the true center front or back line. This is in contrast to the 2 cm seam allowance example. Here you should notice that the edge of the seam allowance is by the pressed edge. This means that if you are sewing 2 pieces together by the center front or center back seam, the seam will actually end up lying right next to the center front or back and not directly on top of it. Does this really matter, you think? Yes. Look at a pair of jeans from behind. The double rows of stitching along the center back seam on the jeans should be exactly on the center back line, not beside it. So, this is the secret to creating a pair of jeans that look professionally made. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, why not try sewing your own jeans? Try my sewing patterns for jeans hassle, which you can buy on my website beklædt.com. Thanks for watching.